Okay, good morning everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the City and County of Swansea. My first duty is my teacher's responsibility to call the register. So if you please indicate some way that you're present, yes sir will do. Okay, Cyril Anderson.
Present.
Thank you. Peter Black.
Present.
June Birkinshaw. Mark Child.
Yes, sir.
Jan Curtis.
Present.
I can't get my mic to work. I am present, sir.
And that's June. Thank you, June. Nick Davis.
Present.
Mike Day. Phil Downing.
Present.
Ryland Doyle.
Present.
Mike Dirk. Kerry Evans. Mandy Evans.
Present.
Will Evans.
Present.
Fitzgerald.
I think you might mean me. I can barely hear you, but I am here.
Okay, we can hear you, Wendy. That's the most important.
So long as you can hear me, that's the main thing.
Robert Francis Davis.
Present and correct, sir.
Thank you. Steve Gallagher.
Present.
Louise Gibbard.
Present, sorry, I was having trouble getting mute off. Present.
Thank you. Fiona Gordon.
Present.
Kevin Griffiths.
Present.
Joe Hill. Thank you. David Helliwell.
Present.
Terry Hennigan. Terry Hennigan.
Present.
Chris Lee.
Present.
Thank you. Preston Hunt Williams.
Present.
Beverly Hopkins.
Present.
David Hopkins. Oliver James. Linda James.
Present.
John Jardine.
Present.
Jeff Jones.
Present.
Linda Jones.
Present.
Mary Jones.
Present.
Peter Jones.
Present.
Susan Jones.
Dear
Sue
good
Jones. So Susan earlier. Susan Jones. No, okay. Elliot King. Erica.
Present.
Present, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Who is that? Miles Langston. Andrea Lewis.
Present.
Present, presiding member.
Thank you. So that was Miles and Andrea, yeah? Okay,
Yeah,
Mike.
sorry, I was a bit.
Okay, Mike Lewis. Mike Lewis.
Present, presiding member.
Thank you. Richard Lewis.
Present.
Wendy Lewis.
Present.
Clive Lloyd.
Present.
Paul Lloyd.
Present.
Irene Mann.
Present.
Penny Matthews.
Present.
Peter May. No. Hazel Morris.
Yeah.
David Phillips.
Present.
Cheryl Philpott.
Present.
Sam Pritchard. Alison Pugh.
Yes, you.
Jennifer Rayner.
Present.
Christine Richards.
Present.
Kelly Roberts. Bridget Rowlands.
Present.
Mary Sherwood.
Present.
Paulette Smith. No. Robert Smith.
Present.
Andrew Stevens.
Present, Chair.
Robert Stewart.
Present.
Gareth Sullivan. Mo Sykes. Self, Graham Thomas.
Present.
Thank you, Mark Thomas.
Present, Chair.
Thank you, Will Thomas.
Yeah, morning.
Linda Tyler Lloyd.
Present, presiding officer.
Thank you, Gordon Walker. Gordon's here. Spoke to Gordon.
I try to get through.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
That's okay, Gordon. Leslie Walton.
Present.
Thank you. And Mike White.
Present.
Thank you.
Can I just go through?
Yes.
Can I just go through the ones we didn't hear from quickly? Councillor Mike Day. Councillor Mike Day, I can see you're present, but I need you to confirm that.
Just joined the meeting 10:34. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Mike Dirk.
Yes, present.
Councillor Kerry Evans.
Present.
Councillor Oliver James.
Yeah, present.
Councillor Sue Jones. Again, we know you're present,
No,
Sue, but we can't hear from you.
Present.
There you are. Great. Councillor Erica Kirshner.
Present.
Krishna.
Councillor Sam Pritchard. Councillor Kelly Roberts. Councillor Mo Sykes. Councillor Gloria Tanner. And that's everybody then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests. Are there any? You've had your circular from the monitoring officer. Are there any other interests to declare? Anyone with their hands up? Yeah, there's a couple coming up. Okay, Councillor Linda James.
And item 10 is a personal interest.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Child.
I can't remember what the social services item is a joint appointment between the health and the council. I'm a member of the health board.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, that's all. No, nobody else indicating. Okay, okay, thank you. All right, minutes of the previous meeting, which is item 3, pages 1 to 7, agenda, page 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, and 7. Are you all happy with the minutes that they're correct record? Okay, thank you very much. Item 4 is written responses to questions asked at the last ordinary meeting of council. They're on pages 8 to 19. We just go through the 8 to 9 rather. Sorry. They're more or less for information. Okay, unless anyone wishes to. No? Okay, thank you. And then on to my announcements. Okay, I got a couple of announcements this morning. The first one is regarding the Roots Foundation Wales. Okay, now the Roots Foundation Wales is a volunteer-led charity based in Cocket. It aims to support young people in care, care leavers, children in need, and adults who have left care with transition period to independent living. I'm delighted to announce that the Roots Foundation has recently received the Queen's Award for Voluntary Services. Okay, it's a very useful work that they're doing on behalf of leavers and so on. Okay, and the second one is the Swansea Canal Society. Again, they received the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service. The Swansea Canal Society is a group of volunteers based around the Swansea Canal in the lower Swansea Valley. They're committed to regenerating the Swansea Canal as a community asset for active recreation and as an heritage visitor destination. They are an active society and work every Tuesday towards that goal. They have various restoration and activities, which include restoring the canal bank in several sites between Clydach and Trebanos, litter picking, operating a vibrant programme for canoe and kayak hire for the benefit of the entire community, and they seek grant funding to support this work. And none of the activities would be possible without close collaboration with Glandu Cymru, the Canal and River Trust in Wales. The Trust gives permission to work on the canal, helps to design and supervise projects, and provides much of the materials used in the restoration, and offers continued expert advice and support. I'm delighted to state that the Swansea Canal Society has been honoured with the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service. It's the highest award a voluntary group can achieve in the UK. The Queen's Award for Voluntary Service aims to recognise outstanding work by volunteer groups to benefit their local societies. I'm told that representatives of the Canal Society will receive the award from Mrs. Louise Fleet. She's the Lord Lieutenant of West Glamorgan later this summer, and 2 volunteers from the Society will be able to attend a garden party at Buckingham Palace in May 2021, along with other recipients of this year's awards. Any further information, it's our own Councillor Gordon Walker, who's heavily involved. He's chair of the Swansea Canal Society. You can contact Gordon for further information. And I would suggest a walk along the canal bank between Cleric and Trebannos is a really inspirational walk. It's lovely. I did it last summer myself. Fantastic. Saw the kingfishers. Amazing. Brilliant. Well worth the effort. Okay, that concludes my announcements. Next item is item 6, announcements of the Leader of the Council. Leader?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to begin by paying tribute to the officers and members who've been working so hard to support businesses to reopen across Swansea following the Welsh Government's announcement. Just to recap, during the lockdown process, obviously, this council has been instrumental in getting help out to businesses across Swansea, many of the local businesses who would otherwise not have been able to survive. And at the present time, we've paid out, in terms of help, both business grants holidays and grant support, over £84 million to businesses in Swansea. Again, safe opening is essential if we're to have a functioning economy in Swansea. And of course, there were further announcements made today around the potential for the tourism sector reopening in the coming weeks, as well as pubs and restaurants. And again, I just wanted to thank our officers who've been working to support businesses to do that safely. And I hope that we'll be well prepared to receive tourists and to ensure that people stay safe if they choose to visit Swansea in the coming weeks. On that matter, I just also wanted to say pay thanks to the police and to our officers in many departments who've been working to deal with the antisocial behaviour that unfortunately a minority of people have caused across Swansea following the lifting of lockdown rules. It is absolutely unacceptable that people are turning up and disrupting communities in the way that they have been doing in places like SA1 and Langland. That activity cannot continue, and again, ourselves and the police will be proactive in ensuring that where people flout the rules or where people cause disturbances for communities, we will act. I also wanted to say that in discussions with Mark Thomas and the team in Environment, obviously they continue to do an outstanding job in making sure we clear up after people who leave mess on our beaches or damage our beaches or public spaces. And again, my thanks go out to them. I also wanted to report, Chair, that Pembrokeshire Dock Marine, I'm not sure I reported it at the previous meeting, but I meant to, the Pembrokeshire Dock Marine project within the City Deal has received government approval from the both governments, and therefore shortly, subject to completion of the independent review recommendations, a further sum of money will be released to the Swansea-based City Deal. So again, very, very pleased that that project has received approval. Further projects, including the HAPS projects, Homes as Power Stations project, have received approval now from the Joint Committee and will move to final approval with governments. Again, hopefully enabling further money to be released from the UK and Welsh Government and for further delivery to take place on those economy-changing projects across the region. Finally, Chair, I just wanted to say that people will have seen a lot of statements being made around the tidal lagoon. And of course, we're extremely disappointed that the development consent order requirements weren't able to be met by the deadline. However, I wanted to reassure people that we will continue to do all we can to work with UK government, Welsh government and any other partners to try and ensure that we deliver a tidal lagoon in Swansea Bay and deliver tidal technology across Wales. That is something we have not given up on, and we hope to be able to make further announcements in the coming months. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Leader. That last statement is very welcome news, I'm sure, to many people who feel a bit disappointed that the previous scheme has failed. Nevertheless, can I thank you for your unstinting energy? I don't know where you get it from, but wherever it is, I think we all need a share of it. You seem to keep going and going and going. But okay, thank you for those announcements. Okay, item 7, public question time.
There are no
No
questions.
public questions. Okay, we can skip the 10 minutes there. On to item 8, interim changes to the head of adult services arrangements. Pages 22, Councillor Clive Lloyd, I think is taking this. Clive?
Sorry, Presiding Member, I thought the Director of Social Services was taking this one.
Is it? Sorry, he's not here, is he here?
Yeah, yes.
Is he present? Where is? We got the Director with us, please.
Yeah, thank you, Presiding Member. Sorry, it took me a while to turn off my mute button.
Okay, morning.
Yeah, morning. The report hopefully is set out straightforwardly for members of the council. Clearly, in the circumstances where we found ourselves facing the biggest public health emergency for a century, we've had to operate at pace to make sure that our support to our most vulnerable residents who would have care and support needs, that we were able to respond really quickly to making changes to make sure that we could adapt our services to prioritise new approaches that were safe for those individuals and safe for the workforce. One of the additional challenges we had was that Alex Williams, our previous head of adult services, was moving on, and we took a view that we needed at this stage to strengthen our adult services senior management arrangements in the context of that change of Alex moving on. Two elements to the changes really: strengthen our integrated arrangements with health, particularly important at this stage, during this health crisis, but also make sure that we shored up and devoted enough time to our, particularly our direct in-house service delivery. So as the paper sets out, we've created 2 interim roles that essentially between them strengthen our overall leadership capacity within the service. Obviously requires very close working arrangements between those heads of service. They both obviously report to me, so I bring that work together within the governance of the council's arrangements. They are interim arrangements, but part of what we're committing to is reviewing the effectiveness of these arrangements to ultimately consider whether the council should take forward a similar but possibly amended arrangement on a longer term basis. At the very least, we know that COVID is going to be with us and in our communities for a period of time, at least going forward. So it might be that the council wants to take a position on, well, at least maintaining this for a period of time. But what the assurance that we're giving is, whilst we've acted at pace to put these arrangements in place, absolutely necessarily, any permanent appointment, we've committed to reviewing within 6 months from when the post started. Any permanent appointments would follow absolutely the usual process of the council. So there'll be a period now where we can give that proper consideration, and then if we're minded to recommend that, the council will have an opportunity to agree or not whether these should continue. But I didn't have anything else to add, Presiding Member.
Okay, thank you, Dave. I've got 3 hands who went up fairly quickly. Councillor Clive Lloyd.
Yeah, thank you, Presiding Member. Could I support Dave, in bringing this report here today. I support it for a number of reasons, but not least because it gives us an opportunity to test out a new structure. And I think one of the failings, possibly historically, is that link between council social care and the health board. And I'm really pleased that has now been taken into account, and we've got that structure in place where we have a real opportunity to foster that stronger joint working, which I think will not only support us during the current coronavirus crisis, but ongoing into the future as well. Obviously not preempting what Dave mentioned, that this is a trial at the moment to see how it actually works. So very supportive of the report. What Dave and the report hasn't highlighted is the enormous amount of work that is taking place behind the scenes as well, to prepare us for any sort of eventuality in terms of future peaks, surges, super surges that we may have to deal with. I'm pleased to say that Dave and his team have really put in place all the foundations and the learning over the last 3 weeks to put us in a position where we can deal with future outbreaks, and those discussions are ongoing and working through with the trade unions as well. I'd like to take this opportunity, if you let me indulge, presiding member. It's my first opportunity as a cabinet member for the social care and community health portfolio, but to place on record my enormous thanks to Dave and his team for the work, the speed at which they responded to the coronavirus crisis, and the tenacity which him and his team have dealt with this crisis on a daily basis. I've been absolutely overwhelmed by the commitment and tenacity, like I said, that they've dealt with the crisis, and I think that's filtered right throughout the whole social care directorate. I've again been blown away by the responsiveness of the individuals that work in that directorate to deal with the crisis. And not only that, but a huge part of this has been the engagement that has taken place with some of the people we provide this service for, because I don't know if members are aware, but we've got capacity that can involve difficult conversations with some of our most vulnerable residents in reducing the amount of care that they've received through this period. So, you know, it's been something that's been an absolutely phenomenal achievement and task that we've been able to put these things in place throughout the last 3 months, and this report really backs up and puts us in a good position to deal with a virus that has not gone away, despite what we might see in the press and various other parts of society. As we open up, the virus will still be with us, so we've got a real duty to maintain a mechanism to respond, as I said, to any future outbreaks. Finally, presiding member, I want to take the opportunity for whatever I can to keep the profile of the social care system in the forefront as much as possible. I think we've all been blown away by, as I said, the work that our carers have undertaken, and it's really hit home to many people how undervalued they've been historically, whether that's been through lack of pay, through poor terms and conditions, through the unpaid carers that carry out care on a daily basis. All these are people and individuals that have quite rightly been valued and recognised as we clap on a Thursday. But my worry is that as we return back to some sort of normality and we open up, that these people tend to go back to be forgotten. And I really want a cool council approach to this in maintaining care. Don't forget care in going forward. And we take this opportunity, seize this opportunity to really make changes, to make a difference. And I've already had discussions with the leader about how we can make representations at a national level about changing the way that we organise our care systems. And I've got a meeting with the minister this afternoon where I'll be making the same points. But really, as we go through the next period, the next 12 months, let's keep the profile of the care system to the forefront. Let's make sure that we can adapt and make the changes that will make it a care system that we're already proud of, but recognises the people that work in the system and the people that deliver the care on a day-to-day basis, to make sure that they have the proper terms and conditions that this crisis has quite rightly highlighted. So I know that in particular we Alex Williams, who was the previous head of social care, has left. Dave touched on that, and I know that Councillor Mark Child will want to come in and pay some thanks personally as a previous cabinet member. So I'll have it there. I'll leave it there, presiding member. Welcome the report. I think it puts us in a good place, but let's not forget care as we go through the next period as well.
Okay, thank you, Clive. Very clear message there. Okay, and the Lord Mayor, Councillor Mark Child.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Thank you, Dave House. Thank you, Councillor Lloyd. A couple of things. I'd just like to welcome Councillor Lloyd's appointment. It would be nice if he'd had a quiet period to get his feet under the table, but he's hit the ground running. I can't think of a better person to do the job. I'm delighted with what he's just said. I think the appointment, the two new appointments, particularly the one involving health, are innovative and key to how we go forward. They meet the Welsh Government's desire for seamlessness, and hopefully there's a lot of lessons that's coming out of this crisis that we can take forward to provide better services for people in future. I want to repeat really what Councillor Lloyd has said. Before the corona crisis, I thought there were three things that needed doing in social services. It needed an investment in the quality of care and provision of care that was provided, the facilities, the technology, all kinds of stuff like that. It needed to address how we pay for it, whether people pay through receive it free at the point of delivery, or whether we carry on with a means test that we got now. And finally, to address the glaring inequity between the quality and need of the services provided and the pay we gave to the people providing that care. I thought that last one would be the hardest to achieve. I think because of this coronavirus crisis, things have changed dramatically. The profile of carers, residential or domiciliary, has risen dramatically. And this was a golden opportunity for us as a society to truly recognise their proper worth and give them a proper reward for the magnificent work that they do all the time. They have shown it through this crisis, but they do all the time anyway. I've always said we've undervalued care in this society. Now's our chance to change that.
Thank you, Mark. And we have Peter Black. Peter?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I first of all reflect what Clive Lloyd has said about the brilliant work being carried out by Dave House and his team, and all the many care workers who have been working throughout this crisis and have kept things on an even keel. I think that we don't appreciate enough the amount of work and effort that's put into that, and I think, as Mark Charles has just said, they don't get paid a huge amount of money, and I think that's something which does need to be addressed for the future. I think it'd be nice too if the £500 bonus could actually be paid over to them. I know there's mechanisms which are still being worked through on the Welsh Government on that. Can I also thank Mark Child for the work he did in social services before he moved on to Lord Mayor, and welcome Clive to the post. I look forward as the current chair of the Adult Services Performance Panel to hearing both Clive and this new post holder coming to explain to us how this integrated services post is going to add value to the work which is being done. And certainly it is a long overdue that we did have a post like this to bring together both what work is being done by social care but also by health, to make sure that those misunderstandings and difficulties can be overcome by having someone in this post. I just had one question on the report. in paragraph 6.2, when it refers to the cost of the report, it says that part of the cost is being met by us not filling an existing integrated manager post. So I'm just looking for a reassurance, if you like, that this new post holder will not spend most of their time taking up the work of this previous post holder, this previous integrated management post, which is not being fulfilled, and that work can be covered in addition to the work which is being which this new post holder will be bringing to the table in terms of working together between the health board and the local authority. I'd be grateful if I could have that reassurance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Dave, can you?
Yes. Thank you first of all for the kind comments from all of the speakers there. I'll definitely make sure I pass on the feedback to our workforce, both within the council and within the wider sector. That acknowledgement of their hard work and commitment absolutely will be appreciated. In terms of the specifics of this question, as Councillor Lloyd referenced, these particular changes to these posts are in a context of some wider detailed work around restructuring of adult services, both direct service delivery and our assessment and care management functions, in the context of that integrated work and the implementation of things like Welsh Government's new requirements around rapid hospital discharge to make sure that individuals aren't spending time in hospital when they are well and not infected with COVID, to make sure that they're being supported to move safely home as quickly as possible, or into an alternative long-term care arrangement if necessary. So all of that work is mixed up together, and this particular post that we haven't filled in the way that we did previously is that the functions are being addressed in that wider restructure. So I certainly don't envisage, Councillor Black, that that there will be any impact on this new senior role being able to fulfil their responsibilities. But it is in the context of this ongoing review. So if we picked up any issues, clearly that would be additional learning for us to take forward into any ongoing proposed arrangements. But it's a point that well made, but no issues at the moment, and we're certainly planning on the basis that there won't be any issues going forward.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Okay, that's report is for information. There's no recommendations there. Then on to item 9, amendments to the Constitution. Mr. Evans?
Yeah, I have nothing to add to the report. It's as set out. It's another information report, just amending the Constitution in light of the previous report.
Okay, that's page 23 to 26. Again, for information. Nobody indicating they want to ask any questions. Thank you. Item 10, Chair of Democratic Services Committee, pages 27, 28.
That's from me again.
Yes.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you to Peter Black for his time as chair to the committee. It was very easy to work with Peter, demanding on occasion, but helpful to work with. He has stood down and obviously is now the chair of the Scrutiny Programme Committee, which in turn leaves a vacancy. Under the Local Government Wales Measure 2011, it's a matter for council to appoint the chair to this committee. We've had a nomination from the largest opposition group because it must be an opposition councillor. That is set out in the report. I have nothing further to add to the report.
Okay, the recommendation is that Councillor Linda James be elected as chair of the Democratic Services Committee. We need to go through the voting procedure.
Yes.
Chris Holly gives his hand up. Chris.
Yeah, Chair, can I move the recommendation that Councillor Linda James be nominated as chair? I know Linda will make a very good job and follow the job that Peter's done.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jeff Jones.
No, those are the questions later.
Do you need to ask something, Jeff?
No, it's for later.
No, for later. Okay, thank you. Right. We're going through
Okay,
through the voting procedure.
so with the vote, if you can say whether you're for Councillor Linda James becoming chair, against or abstaining from this vote. So Councillor Cyril Anderson.
Approve.
Peter Black.
For.
June Burtonshaw.
For.
Mark Child.
For.
Jan Curtis.
For.
Nick Davis.
For.
Mike Day. Mike Day. Mike Day. No. Phil Downing.
For.
Ryland Doyle.
For.
Mike Dirk.
For.
Kerry Evans.
For.
Mandy Evans.
For.
Will Evans.
For.
Wendy Fitzgerald.
For.
Robert Francis Davis.
For.
Steve Gallagher.
For.
Louise Gibbard.
For.
Fiona Gordon.
For.
Kevin Griffiths.
He's had to leave.
David Helliwell.
For.
Terry Hennigan.
For.
Chris Holly.
For.
Paxton Hood-Williams.
For.
Bev Hopkins.
For.
David Hopkins.
For.
Oliver James.
For.
Linda James.
Abstain.
Yvonne Jardine. Yvonne Jardine.
Sorry. For.
Jeff Jones.
For.
Lyndon Jones.
For.
Eddie Jones.
For.
Peter Jones. Peter Jones.
For.
Sue Jones.
For.
Elliot King.
For.
Erica Kirshner.
For.
Miles Langston.
For.
Andrea Lewis.
For.
Mike Lewis.
For.
Richard Lewis.
For.
Wendy Lewis.
For.
Clive Lloyd.
For.
Paul Lloyd.
For.
Irene Mann. Irene Mann. Penny Matthews.
For.
Hazel Morris.
For.
David Phillips, apologies.
For.
Cheryl Philpott.
For.
Sam Pritchard. Sam Pritchard. Alison Pugh.
For.
Jennifer Rayner.
For.
Chris Richards. Christine Richards. Christine Richards.
Chris.
No. Kelly Roberts. Kelly Roberts. Bridget Rowlands.
For.
Mary Sherwood. Mary Sherwood. Okay. Robert Smith.
For.
Andrew Stevens.
For.
Rob Stewart.
For.
Gareth Sullivan.
For.
Mo Sykes. Gloria Tanner.
For.
Des Thomas.
4.
Graham Thomas.
4.
Mark Thomas.
4.
Will Thomas.
4.
Linda Tyler Lloyd.
4.
Gordon Walker.
4.
Leslie Walton.
4.
Mike White.
4.
Just to add, I've had a note from Mike Day. He's having problems with his microphone, but he is for the appointment. I didn't hear from Irene Mann, Sam Pritchard, Christine Richards, or Kelly Roberts. Are any of those going to vote?
Irene Mann here, 4.
Okay. Sam Pritchard, Christine Richards, Kelly Roberts.
Christine Richards' screen is frozen, so
Okay.
she'll get back when she's back on.
So that's
As well, Kelly Roberts.
Hello. Hello. It's
who's
Christine
that?
here.
Dean,
Kelly
were you
Roberts.
for, against, or?
Can you hear me, Hugh?
Yes, are you for?
Four, please.
For, lovely.
My system froze.
Kelly Roberts.
4.
4. Yes. And finally, Sam Pritchard. No. Oh, again, hang on, I got a note from Sam Pritchard. He is for, but he's having problems with his mic as well. Okay, so 1 abstention, everybody else was for. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's overwhelming. Congratulations, Linda. Yeah, I think people still need a little exercise with the fingers and the mute button and others are obviously having problems with the equipment, but we'll get there.
Can I just remind you, when you press the unmute button, it does take a millisecond, so don't press it twice because you're just unmuting and remuting yourself. So be a little bit patient with the software. Thank you.
Okay, that takes us to item 11 on the agenda, councillors' questions, page 29 to 35. Page 29, the first question, Councillor Peter Black. Any supplementaries, Peter?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I noticed that the incidence of fly tipping from April 2019 to April 2020 is up by about 14%. I'm just wondering, do we have the figures for May yet, which might indicate where that is a trend during the lockdown?
That's Councillor Mark Thomas.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question. No, we still haven't got the figures for May. We are expecting them to be higher than May of last year, so the trend is clearly upward, similar to other authorities are experiencing an increase in fly tipping. But as soon as we're out, we can publish them, but they haven't come in yet, but we're expecting an increase on last year.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Okay, question 2, Councillor Steve Gallagher.
Hang on, I wanted to ask on question 1. Remember I sent it to Hugh?
Yeah.
Okay, come on then, who's that?
Yeah, it's first of all, it's a question on behalf of Councillor Kevin Griffiths. As you heard earlier, he's had to leave the meeting. If I read it out, I would like to know how much the fly tipping has cost the council this year to clear up from our communities, and would it not be cheaper to let businesses tip for free? I've also got a little question myself after that.
Okay, Mark, you want to take that question first?
Yeah, I'll certainly answer that. I mean, first of all, I don't know. I'll have to get a written response to how much the extra collection costs are. That's something I don't have at my fingertips at the moment. Can I just, for clarification, ask Councillor Jones, did the question say how much it is so far, is it? Because it's an ongoing issue, so I can give you the...
How much the fly tipping has cost the council this year? Well, we can't forecast how much it's going to cost further on, can we?
Okay, I can certainly give you those details up to date. And the response to the question on if we give free commercial tipping, I don't see how that would address the problem of fly tipping, to be honest. People who are paying for commercial collections are probably, following good guidance and good practice in paying for those. It is generally my assumption that it is not people who are paying for commercial collections who are the cause of fly tipping. So I don't actually see the connection. The other side of it is as well, I mean, I don't know off the top of my hand what the cost for commercial collection is, but it would be substantial, I would imagine. So to give free commercial collections throughout the county, throughout Swansea, would be an inordinate amount of money, I would imagine. But I can certainly put those figures together and publish them. But as I said, I don't agree with the connection between commercial collections and fly tipping, to be frank.
Okay, thanks. Can I ask my associated question now? Yeah, I was going to ask the cost as well. Yes, it's strange the figures seem to increase during the summertime, but there must be a reason for that. But with regards to, there must be problematical areas, do we know what the problematical areas are, and what are we doing to address the problem in those areas?
Well, yeah, there are some regular hotspot areas, effectively. Particular wards are affected, and there are, Mawr is a particular black spot area for us. For example, just to give one example, there are other hotspot areas in many of our wards across the city. It's not unique to one area. We do what we can. A lot of the fly tipping in places like Mawr, particularly where it's a challenge for the council, a lot of it is not on council land. And, our policy is to clear fly tipping from our land predominantly, not from private land. So it does get more challenging in areas like that are particularly remote. Lots of areas of common land, and that will be affected in those more rural wards. We are doing what we can, but it is a difficult problem. One plus side of this, situation we have found is, although there's been an increase in fly tipping, we have responded and tackled each and every one of these incidents. Sometimes it takes a bit longer, obviously, and despite the coronavirus and the stretch and strain on our resources, we are doing an extraordinary effort in clearing the fly tipping incidents. But yes, we have a good awareness of where the regular hotspots areas, and we do things like covert operations and hidden cameras and things like that at times. But it is a very difficult area to tackle. It is, as I said, it's been on the increase over the lockdown period, but it is something we are endeavouring to clear up. But it's quite often it's a reactive reactive approach to it, because as I said, the areas that people are picking to fly tipping are remote areas, difficult to police, difficult to regulate, and people know that, and it is a challenge for us and continues to be a challenge for the authority. But we are doing an excellent job in tackling it where it arises.
I'm sure you mentioned Mawr. It'd be nice to know what other areas as well, if possible.
Yes, okay, I can give you that in a written response.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Question. Okay, question 2, Councillor Steve Gallagher.
Nothing further, thank you.
Nothing further, thank you. Question 3, Councillor Will Thomas.
Thanks, Chair. Obviously, the situation's moved on slightly since I put the question in. Obviously, the toilets have now opened at Langland, Mumbles, and a couple of other locations. I do still think that as soon as the car park was opened, we basically sent a message, Langland car park, sorry, for those who don't know what I'm talking about. As soon as we opened the car parks, we basically sent a message, the beach is open. So that should have, we should have put something in place. Basically, the toilet should have been open at the same time that car park was open. The other thing is the amount of, the leader alluded to it earlier, the amount of litter and antisocial behaviour issues that we are getting on the beach is astronomical. I'd just like to make all the councillors aware. I'm sure they've got similar issues in their wards. But we're getting people driving from miles away. I mean, the DJ, there was a DJ on the beach the other day. Apparently came from Ammanford, drove down, and people are driving from miles away and bringing cases of beer with them, and coming down on. Luckily, we've had some horrible weather recently, just to give the residents a bit of a break. But we've had parties on the beach which have been going on for hours and hours. 2 o'clock in the morning, people on the horns. The residents have really had enough. I sent a message, an email to Cabinet member, the leader, and a few of the officers requesting that the car park was shut. And this everyone seemed to disagree that this would actually solve the problem. But I do think that we need to, when the weather picks back up again, we need to look at shutting the car park in the nights. I mean, it's not a hard thing to implement. You just have someone on the car park who sits there for a couple of hours, doesn't let any cars in, and only lets cars out. It's a real problem. You know, we're getting people driving down from miles away to antisocial behaviour on the beach, aggression. There's a big fight on the beach recently. A lot of drinking on the beach. So I'd just like to ask the Cabinet member why they decided not to agree with the shutting of the car park, really, and I'd like to probably have a comeback.
Okay, thanks. I've got a few hands have gone up to deal with the people wanting to, and then the Cabinet member can come back, okay? Yeah, first one is Rob Stewart, the leader.
Chair, I'd suggest perhaps you permit the Cabinet member to respond. I'll come in afterwards if that's okay.
Okay, yeah. Richard Lewis.
The problem we've got, certainly the weekend before last, the car park's full, well over 1,000 cars, and the car parks, the toilets were shut. And to be honest with you, it was like the third world when we saw the behaviour. I can sympathise with young children and people there on the beach. The toilets are there. They're not in the best condition. And I just think that they should be open. And I did, in fact, object to the Chief Executive. I hope that he would raise the point with the Welsh Assembly government. I had a good response from Mark Thomas, I have to say. But I think that the toilets should be kept open. And if the weekend is reasonable, we will have loads of people coming down on days like today when it's wet and where we don't get the problem. But the weekend before, the car park by me was full, and things that were going on in the sand dunes was disgusting. And I think I agree with, we're lucky in Horton Man, Port Island, the car park is shut, and it does make a huge difference.
Okay.
I support my friend Will on that one.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Richard.
Chairman.
Cabinet member for response, please. Robert Francis Davis.
No, I think it's myself,
Is
leader.
it?
Chair, sorry. Yeah, Councillor Thomas, yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah, I'm happy to
Sorry,
respond.
Chair, sorry. Could I had my hand up here before the Cabinet member responds.
Okay, thank you. Yvonne, yeah.
Can I just butt in? Okay, this probably won't go down very well. Although I accept the issues with the toilets, I do feel saying it's like the third world, it's just so wrong. I could add here, the third world usually follows the first world. So I think we need to find a different reason why people are behaving so badly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yvonne. Okay, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, in response, first of all, with Councillor Thomas's comments about the car parks open was an open invitation to people to come down. Well, I don't agree with that. I mean, first of all, if you look at the consequence, the sequence of events that took place over opening the car parks, Welsh Government announced that they were relaxing the rules on people being able to travel and for what purposes. The car parks were closed when they were considered, trips to the beach by car were considered by Welsh Government not to be essential journeys. So we closed our car parks because of that, and albeit within the 5-mile limit. The Welsh Government then came out and advocated that it would be good for people's mental well-being if they were allowed to travel still within the 5-mile limit, but to go to places like local parks and beaches to be able to exercise more freely and to help their mental well-being. In response to that, we opened the car parks on the back of that Welsh Government guidance, as we've followed Welsh Government guidance on all the reopening of all of our services. At that point, the toilets weren't ready to be opened. Now, a lot of councillors were saying about, well, you should open the toilets. We weren't in a position, there was no Welsh Government guidelines about the reopening of public toilets available, and we didn't have our toilets ready. So we had two choices. We could have waited until the toilets were ready to open our car parks, but that would have been not the right thing to do. The second reason we didn't open toilets is because if you following the Welsh Government guidelines, people were still restricted to 5 miles of travel. So if you were visiting your local beach, and by the way, many of the beaches in Swansea were only, and car parks were only accessible to Swansea residents by the government guidelines and enforceable by the police, not by the council, by the way. So those, on the basis that you were only going local, the need for toilets was far less important than people who were going and travelling great distances to come to our beach like they do in the peak of our summer season. So we had no qualms about opening the car parks on the grounds that it was for local people. So people who did then take the opportunity to visit England and the car park, and Caswell and the car park, and Bracelet Bay and anywhere else, were our constituents, the residents of Swansea. Now, there's been talk about people coming from Ammanford and elsewhere. Those issues about people travelling more than 5 miles, those issues about people congregating, the leader spoke about it earlier in his speech. We are working very closely with the police to help control these matters. But the reason we didn't take the action requested over closing the car park is because we didn't just have Langland to deal with. We've had to consider issues right across, there were previous incidents on Swansea Bay. There have been many incidents in the SA1 and Marina areas as well about unruly behaviour. So we're not looking at tackling one place and one spot and taking corrective action. We did consider the closure of the car park, and after a lot of debate with ourselves and with the police, the decision was taken not to. That doesn't mean to say that we won't at a future time or a future date, or if the weather improved or on advice or recommendation from the police, that we wouldn't consider closing the car park. But that's a decision we made at the time. In reaction to Councillor Lewis's comments about the reopening of the toilets, we opened the toilets last week, the 4 toilets that were indicated, and since then we have been looking at the next tranche of toilets that we will be reopening, and that is something we are debating this week with colleagues and with officers, and we're getting ready to announce when the next lot of toilets will be opened. We are trying to tie that in with Welsh Government guidance on travel and the lifting of travel restrictions. We're anticipating the next round of changes that the Welsh Government are going to announce. For example, it's been widely publicised in the press that it looks like Welsh Government are going to lift the 5-mile travel restriction, for example, and that is in our considerations and thoughts. We are not in a position yet to open all the toilets because the extra measures we've had to put in place to make sure those toilets are as safe as possible for the public who will want to use them when they visit them has been a huge challenge for us. We talked about litter, we talked about resources, we talked about fly tipping. I'm happy to remind all councillors that we have been as fully stretched as a service as ever we've been, and we are being tested at every turn. But we are rising to those challenges, and I've got nothing but admiration for the staff out there who are working endlessly to try and do the best that they can under really, really challenging circumstances. But the same teams who are responsible for cleaning our beaches, picking up litter, making sure everything is safe for users, are the same teams who are reopening toilets and in charge of the toilet reopenings, etc., etc. So we've only got a limited resource, and they're as stretched as it can be. So bear with us. We are using, proper procedures and methods in opening our toilets and tackling our litter. We are focusing on hotspot areas, etc., and areas of greatest need. In all, we are not just randomly doing anything. Rest assured, we are targeting the hotspot areas in everything we do.
Okay, thank you for that.
Could I just come back, Chair?
No, you've had, sorry, Will, you've had an initial written question and you've had a supplementary. That's already 2 bites to the cherry. We still got a lot more work to go through. Leader.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I wanted to come in because I know Councillor Thomas also referenced the question. I just wanted to be clear and add to what Councillor Mark Thomas has said. Firstly, my understanding is that a few days prior to this, Councillor Will Thomas's Conservative colleagues wrote to me to encourage me and other members of the administration to open up faster, which would have led to further and greater problems in places like Langland and SA1. We resisted that, and I wrote back to Councillor Will Thomas's colleagues to explain why that was not an appropriate course of action. In addition, Councillor Will Thomas also tweeted that the car park was going to be closed when the Cabinet were actually in discussions about what the full range of actions would be. And just to add to the timeline, we had, as Councillor Mark Thomas said, discussions with the police the day before, where we went through everything that potentially could be done, and closing the car park was not a preferred option by any of the partners, because as Councillor Mark Thomas has quite rightly said, much of what went on in Langland and SA1 are police matters with people acting inappropriately, causing antisocial behaviour or breaching lockdown rules. Those are not things that the council can take enforcement action against. They are police matters, and we've had detailed discussions with the police. I'm very grateful for the increased police presence and police action on these matters. The other thing I would just say on this is, look, the council wants to make sure it opens its services quickly. That means that we go through a dedicated review of the service to look at the risks associated with COVID, so that our staff and the public are as safe as they can be when the staff are carrying out the service and the public are using the services that we provide. And I just want to make it clear to all members that whilst we've opened public toilets, and we assisted Welsh Government with creating the guidance, because there was no guidance on public toilets from either government prior to a few days ago, that using a public toilet is still more risky in terms of COVID transmission than using your own toilet at home. And, you know, that's why we've advised that if you are using a public toilet, you should do so only in an emergency. Now, the other thing I would say on this is that, look, we will do everything we can, as we are doing, to support businesses to open safely and to make sure that people visit this beautiful area of the world, that they can do so safely. As tourism opens up, we will see many more people coming to our beaches and coming to our resorts. That is inevitable. So again, I would ask members to stand back perhaps from the political posturing and just to support the officers in the work that they are doing to open services safely. That is what we are doing. I commend Mark Thomas and the officers for the work that they are doing. We want to do this safely, and politics shouldn't play a part in it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Leader. Takes us on to question 4. Councillor Peter Black. Any supplementaries, Peter?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just really asking for more information. I wonder whether it's possible to have a copy of the spending plan for the initial tranche of £95,000, and also could we also circulate the plan which is currently being drawn up to spend the additional funding which is referred to in the last sentence of the answer.
Thank you. Cabinet Member for Education.
Thank you, Leader. For the benefit of all councillors, if I could just review the situation. On the 30th of April, Education in Swansea received a letter informing us that we had received an allocation of £95,000 towards additional funding for community and school-based counselling. That funding, the original £95, was to be targeted towards existing waiting lists and increasing capacity to meet anticipated demand arising as a result of the current crisis, facilitating the delivery of support to young people, which is in line with current requirements around social distancing, and training for counsellors to deliver counselling remotely, working with the third sector to develop partnerships and innovative ways of reaching and delivering support to children and young people, and supporting work already underway to meet the needs of young people below the current Year 6 statutory counselling threshold. So could I just point out, in the original question asked by Councillors Peter Black, Mary Jones and Susan Jones, the subsequent additional funding was not new support. The 95,000 already include counselling for the under 6 group. Officers, by the way, the allocation was divvied up in Cardiff. All authorities were just notified of the sum with no explanation of how that sum had been arrived at. We sent back our proposals from Swansea, and those were accepted on the 2nd of June for the 95,000. And then on the 18th of May, the Joint Ministers for Education, Health and Social Services agreed a new budget for supporting mental health. And in Swansea, that allocation came out at, just bear with me, £112,000. That allocation was based on PLASC 2019 numbers. I'm more than happy to submit both plans for spending for the original 95 and the second tranche of £112,000 to all councillors, because I think it's important, both as councillors and school governors, everyone is aware of this. So it's a substantial sum of money, but a fair chunk of it has to be directed towards the backlog of counselling provision pre-COVID, and then taking up the extra capacity issues arising from the pandemic. But happy to share, and I will ask Mr. Hugh Evans to send round the details after this meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Rayner. Councillor Mary Jones.
Thank you, Presiding Member. And we all welcome this money. As you know, we are very aware that there is a problem with waiting lists. But because there's only 2 weeks left of the school year currently, is there any time frame on when this money has to be spent?
There's no money on the time frame. Clearly, the information that schools are gathering during this 3-week period to address some of the needs of well-being will feed into this.
Okay, thank you. Question 5 then, Councillor Linda James. Linda James, any supplementaries, Linda? Linda, are you with us?
It's all right, I'm coming. No, I haven't. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, I have.
Sorry, who's that?
Oh, sorry, it's Jeff Jones.
Yeah, hi Jeff.
I did put it on my list, actually.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, can I thank the Cabinet Member for the reply? I can see actually that he mentions emergency placements, when needed. Can I ask, I know there has been respite provision, especially in Canal, I'm assuming, and the other homes as well. Does this emergency placement affect the respite provision? And with these emergency placements, are they tested for coronavirus before they actually go into the homes? And, where do these emergency placements actually come from? Do they come from health? Are we actually paid for these placements? That's it.
Thank you. Clive, do you want to?
Yeah, so just coming back on a couple of things. So to be clear on the respite issue, obviously, two reasons for the for the rationale on respite during coronavirus crisis. Obviously, one was to create capacity within the care home environment at the initial stages of COVID, and the second one was really the advice from Public Health Wales was absolutely that the safest place for people, particularly our most vulnerable people, was to be in their own home. And so that's why we adopted the policy that we did in terms of respite care and suspending that in all but emergency placements. So yes, they would. The emergency placements that we have dealt with have been dealt with primarily from the health board, so from hospitals, Jeff. And yes, they are tested. Everyone that goes into the care home environment on release from hospital is tested before they go into the care home system.
Can I just ask one other question I asked as well? If these people are actually placed in on emergency placement, are we actually recompensed for that, and how much do we actually get?
So the I couldn't tell you how much we actually get, but my understanding is that we're working with the health board to cross charge in terms of where that is applicable. Then we're fully recompensed, and that is ongoing work that we have in place anyway now. Some of which has been historical, but some of which is has certainly helped social care in getting a process in place where we're able to claim costs back from the health board.
It'd be interesting to know what that charge is actually per week.
Yeah, I'll get that to you. Yeah.
It's not an ongoing discussion between, we've got time for one more question, then question 6. Councillor Mike Day, any supplementary? Is your mic working, Mike Day? No? Cheryl?
No supplementaries from me. Thank you for the response. Thank you.
Sorry, who is that? No, sorry, no. Okay, that exhausts our 30-minute slot. We've overrun it slightly, but nevertheless. Okay, takes us to notice and motion. Black Lives Matters. It's on page 36 of the agenda. Councillor Louise Gibbard to move the motion. Louise?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you very much, Presiding Member. I'm very pleased to be proposing this motion today, which seeks to send a strong message of solidarity with Swansea's Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities and everyone involved in the Black Lives Matter movement around the world. And I want to be very clear that the motion should not be an end in itself, but is part of a process and part of our ongoing commitment as a council to promoting equality and diversity and anti-racism. The main focus of the motion is a promise to work with BAME people to cast a critical eye over our city and to start a new conversation about Swansea's role in the world, past, present and future. What is the narrative that we want to tell? What do we want residents and visitors to know about who we are and what we stand for? It's not, like some have tried to say, trying to erase our history, to sweep uncomfortable facts under the carpet, or to whitewash anything. I studied history at university, I trained as a history teacher, I've taught history, I have nothing but respect for history, but we need to think about the messages that we are sending. What does it say to people of Afro-Caribbean backgrounds to see the names of people who enslaved and tortured their ancestors on street signs uncritically and without any context or explanation? Much has been made locally about Thomas Picton, for example. He has been memorialised for his courage in the Napoleonic Wars. There are statues and monuments to him in other places, and he's in Swansea in terms of the Picton Arcade, Picton Lane, and so on. But he was also a plantation owner, a slave trader who was infamous in his own lifetime for his excessive cruelty, including the case of extreme torture of a 14-year-old girl for which he was convicted. And this was later overturned, but it was on a technicality and under a lot of pressure and funding from his slave-owning peers. So why are we remembering him, but not Jessie Donaldson, for example, a Swansea-born school teacher who went to the United States and set up a safe house for escaped slaves on the Underground Railroad route? Or Willis, a runaway slave who made it across the Atlantic and was given his freedom on Swansea docks. These are just two alternative stories from that same era that we could be telling instead. And of course, there's a wealth of recent examples that we could choose from as well. I fully accept that the possibility of just changing a few street names or putting up new statues or memorials is not going to unravel generations of injustice, structural racism, and daily hardships faced by Black and minority ethnic people, but it is symbolic, and symbols do matter. It's symbolic of a system that means that Black mothers are 5 times more likely to die in pregnancy, that the BAME pay gap totals £3.2 billion less than white workers, that your prison sentence is likely to be 50% longer if you're Black, you're more than 10 times as likely to be stopped and searched by police. They're symbols of a system that deliberately made Britain a hostile environment to those who sought to make a new life here. And it locked up and sent members of the Windrush generation who'd lived and worked here all their adult lives, sometimes since childhood, and in many back to a country which they barely knew. They're symbols of a system that has made BME people twice as likely to die of coronavirus and then delayed the release of a report into the reasons why, because racism is a pandemic, not just as much as COVID-19. So looking at these symbols is just part of the work we need to do to deliver a more equal Swansea. We have of course, started that work. We're a city of sanctuary. There are fantastic organisations based here like Race Council Cymru, the new Culture Hub in the Grand Theatre, East, the African Community Centre, many, many more. But like I said earlier, it's part of an ongoing process. It's got to be done in partnership. It's about listening, learning and acting. It's about making space, improving representation. And it's not about saying, as some people do with, I'm sure, the very, very best of intentions, that they don't see colour. Because if you don't see colour, you don't see the difference and injustice that many people face, and then you can never end it. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. I've got 11 hands up. Can I ask you all to try and think what you're saying? Don't repeat what other members have already said, and try and keep your contribution to within your allocated 1 minute. Councillor Rob Stewart, I understand you're seconder of the motion, Rob?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I won't repeat what Louisa said very eloquently there. But look, I mean, just to say, we will all have been horrified by the murder of George Floyd on the streets in broad daylight. It was a horrendous act, and it's quite clear that it had ramifications for communities around the world. As Louise said, this motion, as some have portrayed it in some of the commentary on social media, is not about erasing our history. Absolutely not. It's about adding to it, completing it, and learning from it. You know, the Black Lives Matter slogan was chosen because, of course, all lives matter. Of course they do. It misses the point to use the All Lives Matter slogan. Black Lives Matter because, unfortunately, even today, Black lives don't matter enough to some people, and to a very few, they don't matter at all. And if we ignore that fact, then we are really letting down our community. I, like most of the people in this chamber, or most of the people on the call today, do not suffer from the sort of discrimination that BAME community members suffer on a daily basis. I do not get discriminated on the basis of my colour. Many people, unfortunately, still do. You know, we have a history that needs correcting. Racial profiling, you know, assumptions that people of colour are not from the UK. Those are things that happen on a daily basis still. And unfortunately, we still have a Prime Minister who goes into writing in disparaging terms, using unacceptable words like watermelon smiles, letterboxes and pickaninnies to describe people from different communities. That is unacceptable. And again, that should stop immediately. There are links to slavery in Swansea's history and the exploitation of other races, as it was for many of the communities across Britain as part of our empire past. It's inevitable that we're going to find things that don't sit well with us. But what we have an obligation to do is to tell that story and to tell it well. Not to erase it, not to eradicate it, not to celebrate it or ignore it, but to tell the story, to learn from it, and to hope to make sure that future generations who come after us understand the full history of the country that we have. And we should be proud of our history, but there are elements of it that we need, that at the moment the story isn't told well enough, and we need to do that. And I just wanted to make it clear, as Louise did, that Picton Arcade and Picton as a name, we have not taken a decision as a council to remove that sign, but we do accept the links that Picton has to the awful things that Louise did mention, as well as having, as with all of these stories, some obviously history in terms of military service and other stuff that he was commemorated for. But again, it's an obligation on us and the work that we do to make sure the full story is told and the full knowledge is there. So I would suggest, and again, I have informed the group leaders of the intention here. I would like that if we can support this motion today, that we ask the Equalities PDC to undertake the work and do so speedily, because we are approaching the 10th anniversary of the City of Sanctuary. And remember, Swansea is only the second City of Sanctuary in the UK. I think it gives us an opportunity to state our commitment to the City of Sanctuary, to make sure that Swansea is a welcoming place for people, whatever age they are, whatever colour they are, whatever gender they are, whatever ethnicity, whatever their religious beliefs, whatever their sexual orientation or nationality. We have a proud history of doing that in recent times. And again, I would like the PDC to undertake that work, to report back quickly, because the worst thing we could do today would be to pass this motion, to agree it, and for action to not follow. What we do need to do is to see this through and to make sure that Swansea leads the way in equality, diversity and tolerance. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Leader. Just to clarify the situation, okay, movers, seconders and leaders of parties have 5 minutes to speak. Everyone else is 3 minutes. Okay, I hope that clarifies the situation. Right, back to the list here, please. Councillor Leslie Walton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I do need to reinforce a couple of things that both Louise and Rob, the leader, has said, and that refers to the fact that a lot of bean is made out of Picton Arcade and the name. Very disappointing that there was a letter yesterday in Evening Post making out that the council had already decided what we were going to do and that we were going to rename it. And I think this is the opportunity to reassure everyone we haven't made any decisions on any of this, because if we do make decisions like that, quite rightly, as the person put in the letter, as a knee-jerk and a stupid knee-jerk reaction, we have got to take time and thought and work with others to make sure the decisions we make on existing plaques, existing street names, existing statues and whatever are considered, and we need to consider each one separately. And it's about, as Louise said, it's not erasing history, it's recognising history and making sure we get across what effects those events in history have now impacted on current life. So in many cases, it might not be renaming, but it might be restating why that was named in the first place and perhaps enhancing what the current plaque says to actually even out the historical factors. So I think we've got to make sure that people realise that we're going to take the work on this very seriously indeed. And I also endorse the things that Rob Stewart said, that it's going to be the place of the Equalities PDC to carry the work out on this. And I look forward to being part of that and making sure that what we come out with at the end represents the results that we want to be fair to our BAME colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Les. Councillor Peter Black.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wanted to move an amendment to clarify the motion. I totally support the whole motion as it stands at the moment. My problem is that we're at the last section of the motion where it says the council agree to. We're commissioning a review, quite rightly, as Leslie Walton has just outlined, and to take our time and to consider this properly. But we're also saying that we're going to take action almost straight away in the first sentence. And I just wanted to add before that, at the beginning of that sentence, the words subject to the review referred to in this motion and move that sentence to the end, just so that it's clear that the action we're going to be taking is going to be after due consideration of all the issues which are before us. That's the only reason I want to move the amendment, because I think it's right that this motion does enable us to properly consider the issues which have been raised as a result of the Black Lives Matter movement. I've got a quick quote here from a historian, Simon Sharma, who wrote the authoritative history of the Jews. He says, "Statues are not history, rather its opposite. History is argument, statues brook none. The whole honour of history lies in its contrarian irrepressibility, its brief to puncture the pieties of power should they belie the truth." And I think it's important that when we look at street names, when we look at statues, we're not talking about history. We're talking about a particular representation of history, and it's important that those representations are properly interpreted and understood as part of our landscape, the landscape in which we live and live out our lives. It seems to me also, Chair, that renaming streets can be problematic. I mean, if we're going to rename Picton Arcade, are we also going to consider Picton Terrace, for example, which has people living in it and causes all sorts of problems? But certainly when it comes to naming new developments, we should be looking to honour people who as Louise has already outlined, who have a history with Swansea and who are important to Swansea. Louise has named a couple of people who are important to Swansea in terms of the slave trade. I could add a few other names. I mean, Clara Neal, Emily Phipps, for example, who have had significant impact in terms of the suffragette movement. Frances Havergal, an important hymn writer who is memorialised in Mumbles at the moment, are three names that spring to mind. And I particularly draw the council's attention to the new development which is going up in Oxford Street, which currently has the name Picton Yard. Why are we naming new developments after Picton when we could, for example, revert to other people and name those developments after people who have more association with Swansea and better control of that? So, in summing up, Chair, I just hope that we can accept this small amendment to the motion, so it's clear in the wording of the motion that we won't be taking action until we've had that consideration, and which has been outlined, and which I think all the previous speakers have stressed is very important before we take any decisions, that there is a proper consideration and a proper process so that people understand why we're doing things and the reasons for doing it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Can I go back to the mover and the seconder? Are you willing to accept that amendment to the?
Yeah, I'm happy to accept the amendment, provided we still do have the emphasis on we need to take action, that we're not going to have just a review and then nothing happen afterwards. But yes, I'm happy to accept if Rob is in agreement as well.
Okay, thank you, Louise. Rob, are you second?
I was just. I mean, I take what Peter's saying, and I as Louise is the mover of the motion, happy to accept it. I will do so also. But I was going to say, I mean, I thought myself and Louise had given those assurances in our introductory comments, and if Peter is prepared to take that assurance, perhaps we can save going through the motions of an amendment and just take the motion as read with the assurance that's been given during the debate.
That's why I'm coming back to you, so that we can incorporate it in the one notice of motion. We won't have to go through the process of of two votes, one on the amendment and one on the notice. Okay, so that if members now recognise that the amendment is included, okay, so it's the last sentence reads, subject to the review referred to in this motion, that the council takes action where possible to remove offending names or public realms items that have confirmed links to slavery or exploitation. Okay, if that's clear. The next member is, sorry, where's the list? There we are, Mary Sherwood. Please, Councillor Mary Sherwood.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Thank you. I just
Mary, can't hear you. Very, very faint.
I shall
Sorry,
move
Mary.
nearer to my microphone. Is that better? And I'm afraid I have to keep my video off because it also interferes with the
the microphone, but I'll try and speak up. I just wanted to thank the number of Uplands residents who've written to me expressing concern that we support this motion, and actually their contact with me has prompted some very helpful conversations. One has given me links to further reading to educate myself more about the history of slavery and empire and Europe's exploitation of Africa, which I can assure you was really not covered in any detail in my Thatcherite school education, which basically celebrated our seizure of spices and minerals and humans for our own gains in a term of work that was headed Voyages of Discovery. So I'm actually really grateful to the residents here for helping me to learn more. One resident has suggested, and I would like to suggest here today, that councillors take up something called active bystander training. Now, I was familiar myself with the concept of not being a bystander when you observe harassment taking place, but I didn't realise that there was training available, so I've asked for more information, and this is what the resident has offered. She says, the concept of being an active bystander is that when someone is faced with violence, aggression or harassment, bystanders are able to, 1, identify when this behaviour is happening around them, 2, assess the threat of the interaction, and 3, respond appropriately. The more people who are engaged with being active bystanders, the more we can challenge unacceptable behaviours and make sure that they do not become normalised. So I would like to ask perhaps the leader whether that is something he would consider recommending that the council looks further into. And finally, I wanted to add that one of the residents who emailed me commented specifically on the direct racism that she's experienced living in Bryn Mill, and that she has always reported these incidents to the local police, who have been very supportive. So that is really excellent feedback about our local officers, which I hope is common to the whole South Wales Police Force. But if I could have a response on the suggestion of active bystander training, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Councillor Nick Davis.
Thank you, presiding member. I too, like Councillor Sherwood, have had correspondence from Uplands residents on this matter. Why do Black Lives Matter? Or why should we be saying Black Lives Matter? Because unfortunately, as has already been commented, too many people think that they don't. And I reference Councillor Louise Gibbard's comments about the ongoing discrimination that is suffered today to show that this is not, as some people say, just an American problem. It's probably not surprising that so many people think that Black lives don't really matter when the people who enslaved people of colour are still honoured and commemorated in statues. It isn't just statues, it's all around us, it's everything. It's in many ways, it's everything we see, everything we hear, everything we enjoy in terms of art and culture. And it was Councillor Peter Black referred to Simon Sharma. I would like to quote Walter Benjamin, who said that behind every act of civilization is an act of barbarism. So we can't tear everything down, and that's not what, of course, what this notice of motion is saying that we do. People are saying we shouldn't forget or we should airbrush out our history, but I think the controversy of the last few weeks over this has been the best history lesson that some of us could ever have, certainly better than the history lessons we had at school. So there's a case for education, for putting things in context, for renaming, for explaining, not, as I say, not forgetting our history, but learning it all the better. But there are some cases where I think action has to be taken, and statues do have to come down. If anyone ever says, well, Edward Colston in Bristol was a philanthropist, well, there's been plenty of philanthropists who've also done many wicked things. That's not an excuse. And I would say as well, if somebody abducted members of your family and took them away several thousand miles in chains and then worked them to death, where would you want their statue to be? Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Councillor Lyndon Jones. Lyndon.
Great, thank you, presiding member. Yeah, we too stand in solidarity with Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities in Swansea and across the world, and in their fight for justice and racism. And we were absolutely shocked at the death of George Floyd, as every decent person would be. Racism makes me both angry and sad in equal measure. angry because there is no place for it in a decent society, and sad because, unlike me, where I have good friends from Black, Asian and ethnic minority communities, people who are racist are missing out on meeting some fantastic people who it is a joy to know. It is our duty to root out, as well as the motion suggested, modern slavery, which we see on our televisions, but in reality, it could be happening in our city at this very moment. I'm proud that Swansea is a city of sanctuary, but these cannot just be words, as others have said. They must really mean something, that everyone feels at home, are welcome and respected in the city, and it is therefore important we work with everyone to make that happen. By reaching out to BA&E communities and residents across Swansea. And in doing this, it is important, very important, that we do not erase our history, but we need to learn from it. And as the motion says, representing it sensitively and respectfully. This needs to be looked at sensitively and would welcome this being considered by a cross-party group, as the leader has suggested, as well as consultation with communities affected and residents across Swansea.
Thank you, Lyndon. Councillor Wendy Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Yes, I am very pleased that the amendment has now been incorporated. I think that's going to be very helpful in the way we progress this item. What I really am concerned about is the extent of what we're going to be looking at. We talk about remove offending names. Well, you know, the deeper you dig, the more you reveal. And I did a little bit of digging, and as you will all be aware, Swansea grew up around the copper smelting industry. And you don't have to dig very deep to discover that copper, the requirement for copper, you know, was a huge demand, and it was financed by Welsh industrialists, and they demanded imported ores, and that fueled the Atlantic slave trade. Now, you know, again, John Morris, I'm sure the leader will be aware of him, had a copper works in Morriston. So, of course, he had then some tenuous links to the slave trade. So, you know, what do we do about Morriston? What do we do about then the coal industry? Now we're talking about exploitation. There are people, and one of them was Elizabeth Barrett Browning, who described the children that were employed in coal mines as being little more than slaves. So do we look at those people whose names we remember, such as the Vivian family? We've got Glyn Vivian, we've got Vivian Pub, and so on and so forth. It's going to be a very challenging problem to decide exactly how we're going to determine those names that are offensive and those that we can live with. And I fully agree that we need to explain the background to a lot of the situations that we have. I hope this will help everyone to feel more comfortable with our history, and that you know, in the future there will be far more explanation as to how Swansea and what it has in it has developed. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. Councillor Alison Pugh. Alison?
Yeah, hi, thanks. Okay, I absolutely support the motion put forward by Councillor Gibbard this morning, and as a cabinet member for Better Communities, it's my duty to speak up against racism and inequalities. In fact, it's everybody's duty here to combat racism. I'm proud we live in a diverse city with 249 different languages spoken, but we must call this out for what it is. It is racism, and we are living in very difficult times, you know, unprecedented times, where we have seen BAME people becoming more seriously ill throughout the lockdown, more people dying. We've seen BAME people hit harder financially, and the educational gap between children from different backgrounds is growing. Race Alliance Wales states we need to be bold and we need to be radical. We cannot go back to business as usual, because business as usual was never in some people's best interests. We must recognise systemic racism, we must measure racial inequalities, and we must plan for race equality. The Black Lives Matter protests have presented challenges for us. There is a division in our communities and a breeding ground for far-right activists. We don't have quality data on BAME communities, and we must have better collection of information on our BAME staff. We need to review with sensitivity our statues, plaques, exhibitions, streets, names, whatever. There is no place in 2020 for good and bad. But there are far more opportunities that have come from the protests, and we must invest in our BAME communities to ensure engagement and meaningful discussions regarding race issues are there, and that we understand these issues. We need to include BAME history in our school curriculum, and our workplace must work towards representation as a priority. We need better representation within decision making to effect better socio-economic outcomes. And as politicians, we must encourage political engagement of BAME communities. And I urge councillors on the next round of East offering the mentoring scheme that more take it up than the handful that did, please. And by promoting community cohesion, we will be able to address inequalities, closing attainment and pay gaps, and tackling racism. We must have BAME representation on the Public Service Board, and I will be taking forward through the PSP that we re-establish the Community Cohesion Group. Black Lives Matter is a movement that cannot stop, and I stand in solidarity with it. Chair, if you could indulge me for 30 seconds, I have been asked by members of the community to just make everybody aware that on the 11th of July, the Senedd would have had a memorial service for the 25th anniversary of the genocide at Srebrenica to honour the victims. Due to COVID, this is unable to take place, so I ask you next week to remember, even though many promises were made after the Second World War that it would never happen again, it did. We must learn.
Thank you, Alison. I can understand now why you panicked when I said you only had 1 minute. Well done. Councillor Gianrina. Jen?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
I would like to support this motion. On the 6th of June of this year, as my husband and I travelled to join the Black Lives Matter rally on Museum Green, he remarked it was almost 52 years to the day since he had been arrested for taking part in a sit-in in a racist hairdresser's. The hairdresser, being racist, said, "No blacks, no coloureds. They will ruin our scissors. Their hair is wrong. We can't manage it." Moving on, we have seen some changes in legislation, but we need to do a lot more to change our mindset. This motion asks us to find out more about our common history. History has moved on a lot in schools from studies of kings and queens. We now do social, economic, and Welsh history. But Black history is still almost invisible. So I look forward to supporting this motion, and even more to looking at the work that the Equalities PDC will do for us to take it forward as we start to celebrate the 10th anniversary of us becoming a city of sanctuary. For me personally, a coming of age moment, going to bail my husband out, 52 years, and we're still looking at the same problems of racism. We've got to do more than just say, "Oh, I sympathise," a lot more. Thanks for the motion.
Thank you, Jen. Councillor Stephen Gallagher.
Thank you, Presiding Member. As a lot of you will be aware, I have served the public in a number of guises for over 45 years. I'm proud to have done so. Not many of you will know the areas of work that I have been involved in, but I have seen firsthand the horrors humans can do to each other. And I abhor what has happened in the United States and the killing of George Floyd. It's an absolute disgrace. But even more of a disgrace is that we are still in this position of discrimination in 2020, and yes, we need to address the issue. We have a police service in Swansea and South Wales that does work close in our community. And Swansea City, with all its respects of its residents and being a city of sanctuary, offers support to all. We must take this opportunity to assess opinions and take action. Sir Trevor Phillips, as we all are aware of, has spoken out against the removal of statues, place names, but teach what they represent and take an informed approach to this subject and listen to Swansea. Are we now going to stop our support for the renovation of the copperwork site, whose wealth grew on the ore of El Cobra mines in Cuba? That was mined by slaves. Remove street names at St Thomas, St Leger Crescent, Grenville Park, named after Pasco St Leger Grenville. No, of course not. As already said, but we have the opportunity to present the history of this site in a manner which befits the 2020 where we are and this century. I'm pleased to hear that we're not going to erase our history. I'm not against this motion, but we must have clarity how this will work, how the cross-party review commission or the PDC should receive comments from our Swansea residents, and let's move forward and show Swansea as a leader. Thank you, Presiding Member.
Thank you, Steve. Next to
Peter Jones.
Here's the list. Peter Jones, Councillor Peter Jones.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I shall be supporting this motion in common, I think, with the whole Council. Racism to me is incomprehensible, and I'm sure it is to all other members. Rejecting people not on the basis of something they've done or on their proven inability or ability, but on the basis of skin colour and ethnic background. This is totally incomprehensible. My own family had some experience of this. My wife is, they call in the United States, an Hispanic. Many years ago, I'm glad to say not in Swansea, but in Reading, where we used to live, she suffered abuse and, wouldn't say discrimination, but certainly very unpleasant comments made on a number of occasions on the basis of her ethnicity, her background. It's not just black lives that matter, it's all lives that matter, but said in the nicest possible way. I know that term has been abused, but certainly members of ethnic minorities such as Latin communities, of which my wife is one, they have suffered abuse too. It may not have been very significant, but it's real, and it upset us for a very long time indeed. Slavery and racism, obviously they are interconnected. And the racism that we experience still today is a product of the slave process from the 15th, 16th centuries onwards. And indeed, racism, I think, emerged as a justification for slavery and as a product of slavery. It's worth remembering, of course, that slavery has a history as long as human civilization. It's not just been a black-white thing. If you look back at Mesopotamia, if you look back at the Greece and Roman empires, if you look back at Anglo-Saxon England even, slavery was commonplace. It's an unpleasant activity, but people appear to be prepared to justify it and use it on their own behalf. The history of the British Empire, of course, continues to be a live influence on how we think and behave, or some people think and behave in this country today. I studied A-level history. I didn't go on to study history at university. I studied politics. My A-level history, we did a module on history of the British Empire. I don't recall any study of enslavement and slavery. The white dominions, conquest of India, yes. The consequences for the people who lived there, no. This is something that we really need, of course, to address, and that we do need to not change our history, we need to rewrite our history. Finally, if I may, I'm conscious of time, I live in Delabesh Road. The Delabeshes, I thought, came over with the Norman conquest. back in the 11th century. I've not been able to establish whether they did, and perhaps they did. But what I have established since is that the De la Beche family were slave owners in the 18th century and on into the 19th century until slave owning was abolished in the British Empire. I don't know whether the road name needs to be changed. I think that's a matter for the residents and the council to consider. But it is a consideration. It's another example of this background of enslavement, of slavery and racism in our community. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Councillor Robert Francis Davis. Robert.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, Member. I think we can all look back at history. We all have. I'm the same as everyone else. But it's, what are we going to do now? What are we going to do going forward, I think was important. How do we educate the population? It's all well and good as saying we are a city of sanctuary. But it's all our problem. It's all our matters. It's what we do. It's how we do things to show the public how it's important. We can pay lip service to things. We can pass being a city of learning, a city of sanctuary, a city of culture. I'm proud that a few months back I had an award from Race Cymru Commission for the work, not me, my department. I accepted on behalf of the department for what we're doing in the arts wing in the Grand Theatre, where we will have 20 different people. Latin American community, as Peter referred to. We had Pakistani community, Bangladeshi community, Palestinian community, and the Jewish community, all alongside one another in that arts wing. But that's not enough. We can do far more. For instance, when we put the pantomime on in the Grand Theatre, should we make sure that one of the lead artists is from the BAME community? Because it's so easy to popularize the panto with the flavor of the month, which is normally a white middle class lead person there. We have done a lot last year, but still not enough. We supported the Black History launch in the Grand Theatre. The Race Equality Council in the arts wing was launched there. We didn't put any money in. The City of Sanctuary. So the City of Sanctuary is run by asylum seekers and refugees. What financial support do we put in? How many of you have quoted City of Sanctuary today? How many of you actually have supported that City of Sanctuary? I think our financial commitment last year was from one section here who put £5,000 in. So when we quote in the City of Sanctuary, remember what we're putting in. We've had a multicultural pop-up display in the Civic Centre. The libraries have put things on. Frank Brangwyn. Now we have the British Empire panels. Where is the interpretation when people went off? People like Colin Rhodes, who ravaged the countries, took all the mineral wealth out of it. The contribution from Swansea Valley, and probably the chains and slaves are taken out, were probably manufactured in the Swansea Valley. But we got to learn from that, and we've got to do our positive actions. The blue plaque, normally the good and the great. How many BAME? And I'm glad to say that will change, because we've got to make sure that it's much wider. And yes, we will be putting up a blue plaque to Jenny Donaldson. Street names, I think we got to look forward. Somebody mentioned earlier Picton Yard. Now, that was a work entitled put forward by a developer because it was alongside Picton Arcade and Picton Lane. And they thought, well, we call it Picton Yard. But that's a working name now for the development. We must look at how we name that development and that destination, and perhaps now is the time to change it, incorporating Picton Arcade, Picton, and a lot. I could go on forever, but I won't. Be pleased to hear. But also, people like the Heritage Lottery Fund and others must also look how they distribute their money to ensure that BAME is forefront in their thinking as well. And I'm glad to see how we work with the Pride celebrations in Swansea, and that will go from strength to strength. And it's right that we do it, because this resolution today, this motion, is not just the BAME, but lots of other things as well, how we work, how we think, and how we deliver. So this will be food for thought. So I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Councillor Chris Holly.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First of all, I'd like to say that, yeah, I'm supporting the notice of motion with the amendment in it. But I think many of you have mentioned the City of Sanctuary. I want to celebrate the fact that's coming up for 10 years, and also link the name of a person who I had an enormous amount of respect for, who fought day and night for equality for everyone, and that was Councillor Nick Tregonin. And when he brought forward this idea that we as a city should be a city of sanctuary, I think everybody applauded it, and in support of this notice of motion, I remember the words that he said about, you know, we should support everyone in our community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And finally, Councillor Erica Kirshner. Erica.
Thank you, Presiding Overseer. I support the motion. I think the time is right as we go forward with all the aspects that we look at in Swansea. I noticed that people have mentioned other prejudices that we hold, but this one is primarily about racism. And whilst I think it's right and the time is right, and the details need to be investigated through the PDCs, the PDC that I will be more than happy to sit on. We have to incorporate all our residents in their ideas for future goals. Jen mentioned about a white mindset, and I think that's absolutely apparent, and maybe of an age where mindsets were set in a very prejudiced manner. And I think all the wonderful words and all the historic facts that everybody's found out about, what we really need to ask is, what are we doing ourselves? It's no good projecting that onto anybody else if we haven't got it right ourselves. So I would say, great, the motion is here at this time. There will be more motions to follow, but let us pay attention to our own words, our own values, and our mindsets, because those are the things that need to matter before we can help others change. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Erica. And it's now for the mover of the motion, Councillor Gibbard, to come back and sum up and any clarification she wishes to make. Louise?
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you everybody for their contributions. I very much appreciate the support which I think everybody has for the motion. And yeah, I just want to echo what Councillor Kirshner just said and really emphasise that this motion is primarily about addressing racism. And whilst, you know, we've talked about, there are hugely problematic elements of Swansea's history and a lot of different things that we all need to explore. It's a distraction to get too bogged down in those other things, like, you know, exploitation in the coal industry, which clearly is terrible. But if we start getting too bogged down in these things, we're never going to do anything. So that's why I think it's right that we have a review, but we really very much take action as quickly as we can, not in a knee-jerk way, in a considered way, but we do take action. And I would be very happy if this motion hopefully passes to immediately speak to colleagues on the Equalities PDC. I'd like to propose to the PDC that we co-opt Councillor Jardine, who has also raised these issues, onto the PDC, and we set out a plan of action as soon as possible, and we encourage all council groups and wider community groups to engage in that process. So yes, it's going to be very challenging, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try, and I really look forward to having some really positive outcomes from this. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Okay, Mr. Evans, do you want to go through the voting procedure?
Does the leader want to come in to?
Hmm?
Oh, sorry, yes, not me. Yeah, I'm going to go to the vote. So again, you can say you're for the amended motion, against it, or abstaining. For your ease, I will quickly put up the amended motions for you to be clear what you're voting on. The bottom bit there shows the amendment. Councillor Cyril Anderson. Support. Peter Black.
For.
June Burtonshaw.
For.
Mark Child.
For.
John Curtis.
For.
Nick Davis.
For.
Mike Day. I'll come back to Mike. There might be a chat. He's having a problem with his mic. Phil Downing.
For.
Ryland Doyle.
For.
Mike Dirk.
For.
Kerry Evans. Kerry Evans. Okay. Mandy Evans. Mandy Evans. Will Evans.
For.
Wendy Fitzgerald.
For.
Robert Francis Davis.
For.
Steve Gallagher.
For.
Louise Gibbard.
For.
Fiona Gordon. Fiona Gordon. Kevin Griffiths. Joe Hale. David Helliwell.
For.
Terry Hennigan.
For.
Chris Holland.
For.
Paxton Hood Williams.
For.
Beverly Hopkins.
For.
David Hopkins.
For.
Oliver James.
For.
Linda James.
For.
Yvonne Jardine.
For.
Jeff Jones.
For.
Lyndon Jones.
For.
Mary Jones.
Go away, Charlotte.
Mary Jones.
Oh, I don't know who that was.
Tita Jones.
For.
Susan Jones. Susan Jones. King. Elliot King. No.
For
Eric Kirshner.
Sorry.
There's so much feedback. You can't hear
For.
any names being called.
Yes.
Elliot, was that for or against or abstain?
It was for.
Eric Kirshner.
For.
Miles Langston.
For.
Andrea Lewis.
For.
Mike Lewis.
For.
Richard Lewis. Wendy Lewis.
For.
Clive Lloyd.
For.
Paul Lloyd. Irene Mann.
For. Oh, God.
Penny Matthews.
For.
Peter May. Hazel Morris.
For.
David Hopkins. David Phillips. Apologies, David Phillips.
People are always doing that. People are always doing that to you. I'm for, and I see that Mandy and Mike Day have sent messages saying they're for it as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Cheryl Philpott.
For.
Sam Pritchard. Sam Pritchard. Okay, Alison Pugh.
For.
Jen Rayner.
For.
Sorry. Christine Richards,
4.
Kelly Roberts, Kelly Roberts, okay. Bridget Rowlands,
4.
Mary Sherwood,
4.
Robert Smith,
4.
Andrew Stevens,
4.
Rob Stewart,
4.
Gareth Sullivan,
4.
Mo Sykes, Gloria Tanner,
4.
Des Thomas, Graham Thomas,
4.
Mark Thomas,
4.
Lynn Thomas,
4.
Linda Taylor Lloyd,
4.
Gordon Walker,
4.
Leslie Walton,
4.
and Mike White.
4.
Can I just run through the ones I missed? Mike Day, we know, is now a yes, so give me a second. Kerry Evans, I can see, is a yes. I did see that today. Yes. Mandy Evans is a yes, as you said. Fiona Gordon, nothing there. And Sam Pritchard, I can see, is now 4 as well. And Kelly Roberts. Oh, so
That'd be, yeah, Carrie Roberts, yeah. 4.
4. There you are. Thank you very much. That's 63 for, none against, and no abstentions.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Second notice of motion before us is on Sunday trading. Councillor Holly, are you going to move it?
Councillor Mary Jones is going to move it because we are going to withdraw it. Mary?
Yeah, I did put my hand up, but obviously I wasn't quick enough. We wish to withdraw this motion as the Conservative government have already done a U-turn over this and they have withdrawn the business at Parliament.
Can I second that withdraw, presiding member, because it doesn't seem to be the need to progress with this now.
I'll just refer to the monitoring officer. Obviously, if it's not proposed or seconded, it will fall. But if somebody else proposed it.
Thank you, presiding member. Just to clarify, there are numerous references to withdrawal motions in our constitution. The relevant paragraph of the constitution is paragraph 18, section 3, which states that if a notice of motion published in the summons, it will require a seconder and shall specify the names of the members giving it. And if there be more than one, then any one of them may move the motion. If the motion is not so moved, it will be treated as withdrawn. So if none of the councillors referred to on the notice of motion set out on page 37 wish to move the motion, it is then withdrawn.
Okay, that's clear. If nobody is prepared to move it or second it, is that the case? Councillor Rob Stewart, got your hand up. Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, I was just checking that point, Chair, in terms of, I think the monitor officers answered it, which is it's only those people who are named in the motion can move it. Is that correct? I think that's what the officer just said.
Yes, Peter, the other references in the paragraph, I checked this morning, the other references in the paragraph, I think, relate to those motions that have already been moved and seconded. And in that case, there would be a requirement for a vote for council in these circumstances. Because no one is moving or seconding it, then it stands withdrawn and there is no discussion on it.
Okay, that's clear. I understand no one that's in the list of names there is prepared to move it or second it. In that case, it falls, and that concludes.
Can I just add
yes,
one item as well? I noticed Councillor Gibbard mentioned that she would be asking the committee, the Equalities PC, to co-opt Yvonne Jardine. That's obviously a matter for the committee to do at their next meeting.
Okay, that's for clarity. Okay, thank you all for your attendance. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Bye.